Hello, everyone, and welcome to the CMA webinar series. Wilkening, Communications Manager here at ARC, and I will be your host for today's webinar, Turning Shelf Measurement into Daily Execution at Danone, hosted by our friends at Storesight and Danone. Now, you can have the best product, best price, and the best advertising, but you can still lose at the shelf. Now, why is that? Because the shelf is the only place where shoppers vote with their wallets. And as we know, shoppers have more choices than ever in this omnichannel world. So that's why share of shelf matters. But too often the metric is inconsistent, debated, and it's hard to scale. In this session, we're going to explore how Danone U.S. partnered with Storesight to standardize share of shelf and deliver clear, scalable visibility with continuous AI-powered shelf intelligence. Now, we want this to be an interactive session today. We certainly welcome your questions, so please enter those in the Q&A function below or in the chat, and we will be sure to get to them. It's my pleasure now to introduce our presenters today. Rob Ahern is Director of Category Leadership at Danone U.S. Now, he advances category strategy with more than 20 years of experience spanning sales strategy, category management, and consumer research across leading organizations, including Danone, Jack Link's Protein Snacks, Walmart, and P&G. Now, beginning his career as a captain in the U.S. Army, Rob is known for simplifying complex, structured, and unstructured data into clear, scalable insights that improve decisions and sharpen execution. We're also pleased to welcome Bram Warshawski, the Chief Product Officer at Storesight. Now, with a foundation in Catman, he's known for translating emerging tech, especially AI-powered analytics, into practical retail execution tools. Now, earlier in his career, he held brand management and digital marketing roles at Johnson & Johnson, and he's been recognized with multiple entrepreneurship awards. With that, I will hand it to our experts to get started. Rob, Bram, welcome, and the floor is yours.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I am excited today to get a chance to share with you actually a couple of stories. The first one, short one. A shopper walks into a store looking for sustainable products and heads straight down to the dairy aisle. Unfortunately, when she gets there, she finds a bunch of holes on the shelf where her products are supposed to be. Luckily, the store manager was nearby, and so she asks him, "Hey, can you help me? I'm looking for sustainable. I can't find anything sustainable on your shelf." Looks at the shelf for a moment and says, well, my out of stocks have been the most sustainable items I've had over the last couple of years. So my daughter Ava told me that I needed to start with a dad joke. I'll let her know I'm still working on it. It's a journey. It's a work in process. That said, I'm actually really excited today to talk with you about a different story, one that is still about the shelf, is still about shoppers trying to find what they're looking for. But this one probably has a much better ending to it. So with that, thank you so much for the very flattering and kind introduction. I'm going to walk through next couple of slides, and I lead category leadership at Danone. Those of you who are not familiar with Danone, hopefully will recognize some of our brands and products. We tend to play around the breakfast area. So things like yogurt, plant-based milk and alternatives, coffee additives, and of course, Evian, our premier water brand. I'm also joined here today by Bram from Storesight, and we'll pass over to you.
Thanks, Rob. Yeah, so I used to be in packaged goods, just like Rob, and along the way, everyone told me how important it was to get out and do store checks. But even though I would always get great insights whenever I would go and visit a store, I just didn't have the time to do them all that often. And it was usually like the same two stores across the street from the office. So I thought it'd be really cool if I could fly across the country and have like an AI helping me out and be able to time travel and cool things like that. And started a company called Shelfgram, which we now have really grown into a pretty big platform used by a lot of the leading CPG companies. Along the way, we partnered with the awesome team at Field Agent, and in June 2024, decided it would be a good idea to vertically integrate these technologies, become one company, and that's really where Storesight was born. Last year at CMA in San Antonio, we got to meet Rob and pretty quickly realized, based on some of the challenges Rob was giving us, that he wasn't just a normal customer that we could kind of sell a normal subscription to, but that there was a bigger opportunity here to co-create and build what we think could be the new industry standard for share a shelf. So, quick photo from CMA last year. If you're coming this year, we're going to be there, and definitely come and say hi. Back to you, Rob.
Okay, awesome. And thank you, Bram. Bram's being kind. I gave him quite a few challenges. Part of it is because I've been working in this space for quite some time, and as I'm sure many of you on the call have had different situations over the years where you're trying to bring a shelf back view. Danone was actually going through a little bit of a refinement process of our strategies and really emphasizing looking at things from a shelf back, shopper back perspective. But how to do this? All of us have different data at our disposal, whether it is Circana, Nielsen, spins, or other types of market measures, retailer gateways, or POS. All of them give us a picture into the store of what's going on without the picture. So how do we go about bringing that real context into how we look at things and how we find the opportunities? That was the nature of the challenge. And anybody who's ever had, I don't know, a few hundred photos land on their desk from store visits, from audits, and you're given the challenge to look at this, to find what are the patterns, what are the opportunities, how might we go ahead and bring this forward? And after you've done that for a couple of weeks, you realize you're too late because the speed of retail doesn't work that slow. So this is the first set of the context that I was looking for Bram and Storesight to help out with. A little bit more specifically, we were looking to do three big objectives. Number one, the challenge to help us measure our strategy compliance. The second, operational resilience, meaning the field teams have got to be able to use this. It's one thing to bring in a new tool, a new scorecard, but really that can turn into antagonistic. You can find yourself focused on the measures as opposed to the meaning behind them and what to do about it. We wanted something that everybody could use and get behind. Third, store level quick insights. All of us have had situations where we see the data pop. What's happening in the Southeast? What's happening at this particular banner? Tell me about that new initiative that we just launched. And I need to get eyes on it because the data doesn't make sense. So that was the three big objectives. We had several subordinate learning objectives that are really important as we think about how do we bring this through the organization. You know, we need the business case. We need to see a big one, and that is how can it help drive not just a change in the way that we measure, but ultimately our culture, the ways of working, the norms. How do we bring it so that it's built in and natural? Obviously, things such as shelving compliance and in-store intervention set the stage for us, but it was a big ask, and I'm excited to say that Storesight stepped up in many ways. One of them that we're going to highlight for you today, there's not enough time to go through all of it, is share of shelf. For those of you who are familiar with that measure, whether you're looking at your brand share, your manufacturer share, or whether you're doing it at an item level or physical space, know that this is a critical way for you to understand how am I really doing. And this is one of the key challenges that we gave to Bram and the Storesight team. I'm going to ask them to talk about.
Yeah, so if we're talking about creating an industry standard, we have to kind of first explore the maybe three ways that companies have approached share a shelf. and I'll just touch on some of the pros and cons and the direct and indirect costs. So with respect to the first way that probably a lot of you are familiar with is within your space management tool, looking at the planogram files. Typically, there's a button, a little pie chart on it. You click on it, and it just shows you your share shelf. So super easy to calculate. Biggest drawback is it's not real. It's this theoretical version of what ought to be there, but anyone who's done a stored walk knows that that's never what a shopper actually sees. Also, you don't always get the files from the retailer or from all the retailers. Maybe you get from some, but not others. And because it only happens anytime there's a planogram change, it's not time series data that can be indexed to POS every month, which means you only get maybe one or two comparison points per year. And it's hard to find the kind of correlation or the causation when you don't have that monthly cadence of data. Also, it requires a big investment to get those files. You have to really build a strong capability where, you're partnered with the retailer. So what if you don't have them? What if you don't have them everywhere? And what if you actually want to know what's really happening? You might turn to your second option, and that would be doing a retail audit at whatever cadence makes sense for your business. That's great because it gives you a pretty accurate approach, however you want to measure your share of shelf. But there's a couple drawbacks to this, right? You end up with a small sample size. Your reps can only get to certain places. Even if you have 100% accuracy, but at a small store sample, when you're trying to project that out and extrapolate it to the total market, it leads to false precision. You probably aren't getting to rural stores, things like that. You have different reps. Each rep, decides to interpret the instructions a little bit differently. That can lead to inconsistencies. And most importantly, it takes these folks away from what they're supposed to be doing, which is selling and merchandising. That's what they want to do. It's how they get their bonus. It's how they drive the business. And so there's a real opportunity cost of taking them kind of out of the field to do these tedious tasks of gathering this sort of data. So with those two in mind, you might turn to your third option, which I would just sort of call, image recognition dashboards. If you go to CMA, you're going to see tons of companies in this space. It's really cool, right? It gives you automated time series data. Couple drawbacks. First is it's pretty expensive. It's expensive because even though the technology is amazing, you end up with this bespoke solution. I think a lot of these companies are more consulting companies that use templates, and they work with you to define your catalog, and there's a kind of big ramp period. You get custom calculation logic. That can lead to low data trust because if we all calculate share of shelf differently, then retailers don't always know what's behind the metric. And as we all know, you can kind of massage that data to spin it any way you want. Also, you still got to get the photos. So you're back to either using your own field team or a merchandiser. And that has the same problems with the second option, which is it can be slow. You don't always get the scale. And for the last couple of years, there's almost been this like image recognition fatigue in the industry where you just try one vendor, try the other one. And one of the things I've noticed is if you kind of go to CMA and walk the floor, Rob, if you jump to the next slide, you'll probably hear a lot of this. We're not really like all the other image recognition vendors. And sort of jokingly attribute this to every image recognition vendor. So, when Rob came to us and said, well, like, hey, we got to build this not as a project that's delivered, but as a product, that inspired us to say, well, what would have to be true to get actionable share of shelf data? So first of all, it's got to be the real world. We can't just look at theoretical files. Second, it's got to be cost effective. And so one of the nice things about crowdsourcing is it's the most cost effective way to gather this data. And that allows us to get to rural stores. It allows us to get to every single banner. We're not limited by where, say, a merchandiser has the ability to walk into the store. It's got to be unbiased, right? Like a big problem with the field teams or the merchandisers is if you ask the same folks that you're paying to do merchandising and execution to then report on merchandising and execution, sometimes it's kind of like they sort of fix the shelves right before they take the photo. I often joke it's why there's no ugly selfies on Instagram. It's kind of the same thing. And back when I was a brand manager, I didn't think I had a lot of retail execution issues because the photos I saw were coming from my field team. The folks that are taking our photos, they don't know why they're taking the photos. They don't know for whom they're taking the photos. So it really is unbiased. You got the scale piece, right? It's not enough to get to a handful of stores. We need hundreds in order for this to be meaningful. It has to be ongoing because then we can index it to POS data. to understand, what's working and what's not working for the category. And if we can kind of get those 5 things right, we feel like we've got something actionable. So I want to show you a quick little demo of what we built in partnership with Rob. What you'll see here is the Storesight platform, and it starts with us capturing photos. We'll walk the whole aisle so that we get this planogram view. From there, it's one click to run your share a shelf, and you get on-the-fly analytics. You can look at it at the brand level, at the manufacturer level, depending on how the category works. If you want to look at it by facings or by linear space, you can just toggle that button. We also give you a couple views into shelf quality, right? And you can look at this by retailer, over time, lots of different ways. Really simple, easy to understand, digestible metrics with one-click PowerPoint export. And we think this is going to enable a lot of new selling stories across the organization. So Rob, maybe you can chat a bit about kind of post-deployment, what this has done culturally at your company.
Yeah. So let me first start by saying that the first question that usually comes right after that demo is, does it really work that fast? Yes, it does. And that was not an easy ask for, but part of what, and this segues into the cultural challenge, part of what the challenge is that we have to make any solution that we bring forward from a capability standpoint accessible. The more accessible it is, the easier it is to use, the more it will get used. The cultural takeaway, though, that I wanted to spend a minute talking about is, how do you take something, a new capability, and codify it into the organization, make it part of the DNA, make it part of the ways of working? Well, that takes some deliberate planning. We spent a lot of time talking about exactly what that would look like between the rollouts and the trainings, but importantly, getting into how teams might actually use it. One example that I'm going to highlight here is our annual Danone Day. That celebrates Danone's anniversary. And as part of that, we usually have different themes about how we're going to appropriately celebrate. This past year, feet on the street, get everybody out into the stores, which is not the most unique approach per se, but how we did it, well, we changed some things up. This time, as they went in, they were given the Storesight app in order to collect data to actually become in-store shoppers and researchers. And they did it in a way that is able to actually, you'll notice the picture in the middle of the young woman with the hat on as she is taking a quick snapshot. What you may not see is what she's looking at. So as you get into the mobility of the Storesight app, it allows you quick insights on the spot, which if you're trying to foster a conversation at the shelf or even across shelves, this turned out to be particularly useful. We had over 600 people that were going across stores simultaneously. And while maybe not the most research fundamentally sound, that's a lot of pictures, a lot of conversations. And this wasn't just a team of salespeople. This was our total team. So HR, R&D, legal, sales, finance, marketing, everyone, including executives, were out running around taking pictures and sharing what they found on the spot. We also brought it together virtually. The important thing is, those of you who are familiar, been around a little bit and have heard the term milk run, head to that store with your executive and show them the pretty shelves that you made sure were set before they got there. Yeah, that's not what we were doing. We were doing something very different. We need to embrace the shelf as it is, and importantly, understand it how it is. So this means not just pulling the data together quantitatively through our various data sources, but it means going out and touching the shelf, talking to the managers, talking to shoppers that are willing to talk with you. And that's what we were able to bring home. And you can see some of the pullouts on what we're able to use on the spot that day. There's a lot more to this, but one of the things that I'm going to do, just for the sake of time, is turn it over to Bram to kind of take us home here a little bit.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. I think, looking back at our partnership, it's been amazing what we've been able to accomplish in a year, starting by looking at the legacy methodologies and then trying to figure out what something new and better could look like. I'd say the thing I'm most proud about is creating a common understanding of the category and improving data trust. And through our kind of 3 million strong agents that are out there that we crowdsource from, I think we've been able to build a neutral, objective, ongoing third-party measurement that has really transformed how Danone in particular thinks about the shelf, but potentially the whole industry. And so we're really excited to share more at CMA and would love to welcome any questions if there are any at this time. And thanks for letting us share a little more about what we've been up to.
Thank you, Bram, and thank you, Rob. And yeah, we've had a number of questions start to filter in. So certainly for those that want to, get a question or chime in, please either do use the chat or the Q&A function below. We've got one that's come in, and this one I think is for Rob first. And with tools, right? It's the whole idea is how do we get adoption, keep adoption, and then in the best case, how do we get adoption to where folks beyond our teams are starting to use it, right? How do we start to become a champion for other functions to use it? How do we all start to share in this? So the question is, what does adoption look like at Danone beyond Catman with this tool, Rob?
Great question. And I'm going to tell you that it's not an easy thing. It needs to be planned for. I'll tell you that there's two paths to adoption, and that is vertical and horizontal. Vertical, you need to plan on bringing in from your analyst and your field reps up through their managers, directors, general managers, and top leadership. And the reason that you need to do that is part of the capability that you're bringing, especially if it's a new type of data or new way of acquiring it or looking at it. They each have a different set of decisions that they're trying to make. That's often one of the things that goes wrong is you get a solution and somebody says, oh, that's a Catman thing. That's a marketing thing.
Yeah.
That's an HR thing. How do you make it broad so that it's our thing? It's a Danone thing. So part of it is planning as part of your process, the right level of updates to the right stakeholders. Bring them into it to the extent that it makes sense. You don't need too many cooks in the kitchen at once, but it shouldn't sneak up at the end and somebody says, what is this? Okay. The horizontal path is taking it from your, call it focused function, maybe sales and category leadership, and how do you bring in everybody else who's part of the team in a way that makes sense? We actually had quite a few surprises in this area when we started learning that our supply team was using it to understand a little bit more around the new innovation that was going to market. We saw HR using it because they could, and because they have ideas that they often aren't able to bring forward. But when you can point at a picture or point at a question, then this brings you into the conversation. And as we all know, that brings some of our best ideas come from the unplanned sources. So to sum that up, plan for it vertically and horizontally.
Yeah, I'll just add, Rob, we had a client where one of the big users was legal. And they were getting asked questions from the marketing team, things like, hey, we want to say non-toxic for kids or something like, how risky is that? And they were using our text search feature to pull up examples across category in the past, understand precedent. I thought that was really cool. So yeah, a lot of surprises along the way. And that's one of the great things about having unlimited user seats is you get to find out kind of where there's value across the whole organization.
If you can keep HR and legal happy.
Yeah.
I generally have found that these are two good things in life. So if you can uh, 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 inspire, amaze, and make them more efficient and happy, boy, that's a good thing as opposed to being on the other side of that coin. So good, really, really interesting stuff. Let's let's kind of double click a little bit more into that. Because it got a little bit into kind of the change management end of it, right? Or kind of how to make this work. And so, Rob, building on that, what advice would you give to teams that kind of feel that this pain of share of self, but are worried about, you know, both change management and culture shift? Expand a little bit about everything that goes into kind of making this work.
Well, so great question. How do you actually make share of shelf or any other measure work? I think that there's two parts to that. There's a technical part, and of course, there's the organization part. You have to start with the big question: what decisions are you trying to enable? What questions are you trying to answer? And then map it back. One of the dangers is if you only have a hammer, right? All you see are the nails. And that doesn't work very well either, especially if you find yourself pushing something that doesn't really seem to be relevant for the stakeholders. Now, when you start digging into the technical side, one of the challenges that we ran into, you might run into, is what I like to call the two watch problem. You have two watches, you never really know what time it is. So if you're getting a measure from one place, how do you reconcile if you're getting it from someplace else? The answer is very, very carefully. And what you have to do is set the conversation and frame it around what this can help and what it can't, and make sure that that message is part of the education and the practical application when you start to, kick the tires and put it to use. In addition to that technical side, the organizational side is bring people in early as for feedback, and this proved invaluable. Something that is awesome about my team at Danone is that they are very willing to share feedback with me on what's working and what's not. Hopefully, your organization is the same way. And when they do that early and often, especially when you are able to iterate and incorporate it, you don't just have skeptics, you start to develop evangelists and advocates that are able to help drive the excitement of this new idea you're bringing in. So it's not an easy lift, but you've got to be very careful on how you manage the technical and how you manage the organizational, and they have to be managed simultaneously.
Great stuff, Rob. Great perspective and a great point again about well, how fortunate you are to have a team that'll, you know, these webinars explore tech. They really are again about elevating our work, and they're really about again being additive vis-a-vis both the work and personal culture we're all trying to build on our teams, right? So, Rob, I think that's a great point in terms of again the idea that you know the best teams are the ones where folks will speak up and say, "I this works, this doesn't work." That great culture you've built there. So brought a smile to my face. We've got a great question that's come in the chat that I wanted to get to. Laura Tyne has asked one. Hi, Laura. Thanks so much for joining us today. And her question was, and Bram, maybe you want to take a crack at this first, and Rob sort of layer in as well on this too. Laura asks, are we able to link the data captured to category segments so we can evaluate segment share of shelf, and not only brand and manufacturers? And I think what she's kind of asking too is simply, can you answer how the data is calculated from photos? So Bram, if you want to take that one first.
Yeah. First off, hi, Laura. Thanks for joining the webinar. Nice to see your name pop up. Yeah, so the vision that we have is basically that we would actually do share a shelf at the photo level. and then provide any level of aggregation above that. So, groups of photos, planograms, filtered photos, things like that. One of the hard things about packaged goods, especially when you sort of work with lots of different companies, you see this is everyone defines those segments a little bit differently. I have a conspiracy theory. It's that they can make number one claims, but for example, we're not a potato chip. We're a stackable hard bite chip. It's like, dude, you're a potato chip. Like, I don't, what to tell you. Like when a shopper goes and looks for this, they're not looking for that. But I totally get the need for it. So it's something we're working on. But the vision we have on how to kind of productize this is to give you as many filters as possible to define what you're looking for, because maybe you're looking actually to see um, only segments at a retailer in their small set where there's no out of stocks, et cetera, and one of your brands is listed. So we want to create as many filters as possible and then provide any level of aggregation. One of the things you might have noticed actually in the little demo is that all the charts were in a modal that pops up. That's really intentional because that way there's not a dedicated section. We want the analytics to be seamless within the photo feed so that you can filter however you want, look at the data, and when you're kind of saying, yes, that's the view that I'm interested in, whether it's segment or something else, you can run those analytics on the fly. But that's the approach that we're taking just because there's kind of a never-ending way of looking at it otherwise. I don't know if that answers your question, but you can reach out and we can also jump on. Yeah, cool.
Perfect. To your point about the way we sort of talk about products, right? I like to say I'm not bald, I'm just follically dormant. So I understand what you were
Yeah,
saying
there
there.
you go, Mike.
Um, Other questions come in. Rob, if you want to take this one first, what are the biggest outcomes that you've seen from this tool? Whether it be quick wins, bigger strategic things, but what stands out to you in terms of outcomes from kind of starting to move in this direction?
Yeah. So there's multiple outcomes that we measured as part of the pilot. Did we achieve our learning objectives? We did, and learned a whole lot more than we thought we were going to. That's really one thing that I'd like to say in terms of the pleasure it was to work with Storesight. One of the earlier slides was stepping into the kitchen, and it's a little bit of a metaphor, but in this case, what it means is that you have to keep going at it until you're actually able to achieve what the limits are and hopefully what your original goals were. It's an iterative process, and it is not an easy one. If I were to pick the big achievements, though, I think that we did spark um, towards delivering against that cultural goal. As we continue to drive our store back, shopper back strategies, this is a piece of it. It's not all of it, but I think that because of the breadth of the involvement that we had, that it's definitely moved up in share of mind of the team. So if I had to pick the one thing I'm most proud of on this, it's probably the cultural push.
It's powerful stuff, Rob. And again, in the sense that, again, we ultimately people are at the center of this, and that's probably my big takeaway of this, right?
Mm.
And it's the 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 installations of tech, the adoption of it, it only works if, again, if it ties to your culture, if people buy into it, if if it not only elevates their work, but they like using it. And so that was really kind of, this has been a cool display of that. And I think, probably a good way to put a bow on today's discussion. But before I go, uh, Brad, Bram, Rob, let's go around the horn. Just give the audience one or two takeaways from today that should just kind of remain top of mind for them about what we've talked about today. Bram, you go
Yeah, I
first.
got
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. I think, a big takeaway, and it's sort of obvious based on the premise of the webinar, but worth noting because we haven't really been explicit about it, is just that, like, to move the industry forward, the solution's not just going to come from a vendor and it's not going to be built by any one manufacturer. We really need that level of partnership because, it's one thing to build really cool technology. And trust me, I've seen all the demos. Like, there's some really fancy stuff out there. It's another, to really deeply understand the business problems. And both of these things are changing. The tech that was available even a month ago, is not the same as what's available now. And of course, CPG is one of the most dynamic industries. Shoppers are always demanding innovation. There's new business challenges, it seems, every year. So bringing the two together, it feels like we've done a lot of the heavy lifting that hopefully the industry can benefit from. But I think it's also a good model of just how powerful co-creation can be.
Rob?
Yeah, I'm going to actually build off Bram's answer and tell you, if you remember one thing coming out of this, remember the triple win. What makes something possible to get an organization behind it is when you are truly solving for the shopper, for the brands, and for the retailers. And that was how we approached it. If you go back to this conversation and think through all of the touch points that we had, we were ensuring that the shopper was at the center. We were ensuring that our brand's relevancy was something that we kept in mind. And we were ensuring that it was going to be a win for the retailer. That's where our story started. And if maybe we're able to push forward, I will come up with a very different story and very different joke. I'm still working on it. Next time that we have a chance to talk.
Great stuff, Rob. And we've got time to polish the material. We're not in Vegas until Sunday. We'll make sure we all get it ready for the main stage. Some of our best stuff. You use the earlier shows to workshop it, and that's kind of the 7 o'clock shows when you really want to nail it down. And I'm sure that'll be the case. And our thanks to Rob and Bram today. Certainly be sure to check out their presentation at our annual conference this coming Monday afternoon in Las Vegas. And of course, do make sure to say hi and stop and see our friends at Storesight at the Tech Expo Hall. You see the QR code on the screen for the happy hour. Certainly do check that out. And again, you see Bram, you see Rob lingering about at Caesar's Palace. Stop and say hi. It's always good to continue that conversation. Talk about challenges, opportunities, what you're facing. I think some of the best things and best opportunities in our conference are kind of in those hallways where you see somebody say, "Hey, I know you. Let me introduce myself." So certainly encourage you to do that as well. So for Bram, for Rob, I'm Mike Wilkening. Have a great day. See you at Caesar's Palace here on Sunday. Exciting times. Vegas, baby. You guys have a great day
Awesome.
now. Take care. Bye bye.
Awesome. Take care.